welcome to another episode of Leading Wyoming podcast. We're here with Josh Dorrell in Lander, Wyoming. We're here for the first session of the Wyoming Academy kicking off. And so we got to do a podcast a couple of years ago on the Business Council. What's the point?
What is the point?
Yeah, and we didn't figure it out, so we're back.
We're back.
Yeah, we're going to try here.
You think we'll get it?
No, I don't. So we'll see how it goes.
It's doubtful.
I heard this on another podcast recently, and I thought it was a good question. What advice would you give to yourself 10 years ago?
Oh, 10 years ago. I think I would give myself the advice of maybe pay attention a little bit more to what's going on around you and less about what I control and more about what is happening around me.
Okay.
And just try to understand where people are coming from and think less about my response to a question and think more about why it was asked. So in that vein, why did you ask that question?
Well, the advice on this podcast was that whatever advice you needed to hear 10 years ago is probably the advice that you need to hear today.
I can agree with that. Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's still really valid.
What could you or do you do to try to pay more attention to what's going on around you today?
Usually it's asking questions about it or trying to, even later reflecting and thinking, okay, well, why did they ask that? I think my first reflection is one of still internal, like how could I have answered that better? But I think the next one is sort of like, why would somebody ask that? What were they really trying to understand? Or what did I miss about what I was presenting or what we were talking about that made them ask that question? And so I think it's just digging into that a little bit more. And I always think about it like you're never done. So the conversation I had, I don't have a lot of like, oh, I should have done this. It's more like I'm gonna do this the next time because the conversation happens over and over and over again. You have opportunities to use that knowledge. So I think that's kind of how I viewed it.
Yeah. I think being present as a leader is hard. When you're in a meeting and your staff are talking or you're in a community meeting, you're 1,000 thoughts. I don't know, I heard that we have 80,000 thoughts a day, and I believe it. And I also heard 60,000 of them are negative, which is surprising, but maybe not surprising. So how do you sort of like bring yourself into presence in a place?
Well, sometimes you don't want to be present. And what I mean by that is that there are some times when you want to actually be abstracted from the situation so that you can see what's going on in the situation. Because I think there's a lot of metadata going on in a conversation. And if 93% of the message that we have is like tone and expression, and 7% is verbal, I think a lot of times we get tripped up on the verbal part, and we miss all of that. And so something that I learned a long time ago was I worked in technology for a long time, and I didn't necessarily understand the technology. I understood it just enough, but I wouldn't understand some of the deeper things that were going on from a technology point of view. So I would sort of ignore it and tune it out and just watch body language, and I would watch how people were interacting. I would try to pick up on the cues that would say what's really going on in the conversation so that I could, as a leader, your job is not necessarily to know the technical stuff. It's to sort of understand how people work together and how do we get to where we want to go and how do we help people continue to progress. And so for me, it was sort of like not knowing the language, but understanding the cultural and the expression and tone to understand, hey, this is what's going on. That's what I should pay attention to. So I actually sometimes work to not be present. I work to try to see what else is going on. Because sometimes as a leader, or most times as a leader, you don't actually, the minute you step outside of expertise and stop being an expert, you're no longer an expert. And every day that you're not an expert, you are farther and farther away. So sometimes, in fact, when I do plug in, sometimes I make things worse. When I really plug in on things that I think I know.
You're like, I could solve this.
Yeah, I could solve this. And I used to solve it 10 years ago. And now I'm not useful in that way. So I kind of have to flip it and try to be useful in another way.
Yeah. Okay, I have a lot of follow-up questions.
Okay. Well, good. This is probably because that was a really long answer.
It was great, though, because I think it's the complexity. I talk a lot, and you've heard me say a lot, like two things can be true at the same time. And so I think you're trying to read the cue. You're trying to read the situation on all these levels at the same time. And so you're trying to read the subconscious or nonverbal cues. You're trying to hear what's being said. You're trying to put it in the context of the situation. and then you're trying to think like, what does this person or this group need, and then what will they be receptive to, because what they need to hear might not actually be like the message they can receive in that. And so for you personally, does all of that happen in the moment, or are you somebody who like goes home and like puts the pieces together later?
I try to do it at the moment. I'm not always that good about it, and I think I'm worse at it when I'm really passionate about a topic, because I really want to help, quote unquote help, and sometimes I don't. And so when I either know a little bit enough to be dangerous, or I'm really passionate about a topic, I'll plug in. And in the moment, that's when you'll start to miss some of those things. And when I'm able to abstract, you still want to do it in the moment in some cases, because you can make a difference in the conversation in a moment that really sort of gets it back on the rails, or puts it on the rails that it needs to be on, rather than it going down the rails. But I think that's the challenge that I'm working on, is how do I recognize in myself when those moments are occurring, so that I can abstract, or I can focus on the things that I should be focusing on. Because in almost every case in the role that I'm in, there are people who know the subject matter better than I do. They understand the situation better than I do, and they have the on the ground knowledge, and so I need to remember that I can't try to bring more of that to the table. I need to bring my perspective from a different place that I actually have, and use it to make the situation better. And a lot of times it's just hard to do. I mean, I think that's like you said, trying to operate on multiple levels. Not many people can truly do that, and I'm definitely not one of them. What are your red flags? How do you notice when you're getting too swept up in something, or when you're suddenly not offering value in a way that's meaningful to your team? That probably happens afterwards. So that's the hard part, is that I don't always know it in the moment, because I do think that again, like, those are things that maybe had served me well in different roles, or had served me well in the past, and so I can go to those and I feel like I'm making a difference. And in some cases I do, but in less and less cases I'm doing that. I'm making a difference. And so those are the parts. I'm making a difference. I'm making a difference, whether it's a positive one or a negative one. Or diminishing return. And so I think that's where the reflection comes in, or the thinking about what is really needed in the situation, not necessarily what is being said, or not about how I should behave in that way. It's more like, what's going on and what tools do I need to bring, not what is my natural instinct to do. And I think that overcoming that natural instinct is hard, and it's one that is going to take a lot, So maybe if I could work on this advice that I just gave myself from 10 years ago, it might be 20 years old, but maybe I'll be a little bit better at it when I'm 60. We'll probably still need to hear it. We'll just be in a new context. I for sure think that's how it works. Well, you mentioned kind of what served you well previously in your career may not be the thing that is helpful, and actually it may be the thing that's hurting you. We just, at Leadership Wyoming, we just read this book, Strength to Strength, which I think you've read with Arthur Brooks, and he talks about moving from fluid intelligence, which is like IQ and technical capabilities, to crystallized intelligence, which is wisdom and mentorship and bringing experiences together. And so when you read that book, how did you think about it in the context of your job? Well, I saw it, I saw it as really hopeful, right? Because you do start to feel like, hey, there are a lot of things that I no longer know about that I used to know about, or the world is progressing at a rate that I'm no longer progressing because I'm focused on something else. And at some level, our cognitive ability in that way, maybe it declines. It does. And so it sort of gave me a lot of hope and a lot of excitement toward the next half of my career, or I don't know how long it's going to be, but my next portion of my career, because that's something that is needed. And so I was like, okay, this is good. I think the challenge that I have, and I think a lot of people have, is being able to let it go, so that you can use those other skills and feel good about those other skills. And in some ways, I think I feel lucky about that, because I have an engineering degree, but if you ask anybody that was in my classes, they know that I'm not an engineer. They're like, that probably, C's get degrees. Right? And so I've never been like super technically savvy anyway. I've always been more trying to understand people and their motivations. So in some ways that I'm set up a little bit better, But the other part of it is that then that part of my career after, going to college for engineering and being really, maybe technical, partially technical, was in sales, and where you're working to persuade, and you're working to help people make a decision that benefits them, and all of that's still true, but you're much more technical about it. And so I think that part of my career, I was very technically savvy as a salesperson, and it's persuasion and helping people make a decision that benefits them, which is not that different from a leadership role. You're helping people make decisions that benefit them or the situation. Yeah. But I think it's now what I'm trying to do is even pull myself out more and help the people who are in the situation help the situation.
Yeah.
So you're kind of doing a different layer. Yeah. And that it's fun, but it's also you also want to jump in there. You want to get in there and work on it.
Yeah. Yeah, I know sports and coaching have been a big part of your life, and so it sounds like you're talking about something that more resembles the coach mentality. Like when you were coaching your middle school son in baseball, you don't get to like go to bat for him.
Right.
All you can do is pour into him, and his performance is his performance.
Exactly. And you can only own so much of that. Yeah. And when they're pitching, or when they're at bat, or when they're on the free throw line, you don't get to do those things anymore. And it's better because there's no way I would be able to do any of them now anyway. But that coaching situation helps you for that, because early in my coaching days, I still played basketball. Yeah. And so I do play pickup games, and so you could still play. Yeah. But the transition for me was when I was coaching my oldest daughter, Olivia, and they were probably like 11 or 12, and we were at the end of a game, and they were all like, what do we do? And we were up by 2, and the other team had a really good 3-point shooter, so we came up with this plan to make sure we guarded this one player, and it worked out, and they lost it. They were so excited, and I was way more excited than I'd ever been when I had won anything, and so it just felt way better, and I was like, okay, that's something I got to pay attention to, because it's the same kind of thing that you see. You don't, there aren't a lot of like trophies and high fives necessarily in business or in organizations, but there's still that moment where you can see the light come on for somebody, or you can feel like you made a difference in the situation, even though you weren't in the situation. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to take a 90-degree turn.
Okay.
I also heard from a friend recently that before the age of 35, you learn from success, and after the age of 35, you learn from failure.
Okay.
Are you over 35?
In dog. Yes, I'm 51.
Okay. Yeah. Do you agree with that statement?
Well, so I think, we're probably much more comfortable with failure at some point in our lives, and I was always a late bloomer, so it's probably like 45 for me. Like it probably took me a long time to figure out that failure is actually the teacher. I think it's always the teacher. Yeah. It's just whether we want to admit it or not is another way to look at that, because I think you should learn more from those things, and you have a bigger opportunity, because again, you're going to be in that situation again, and sometimes when it works out, you think you know why it worked out, but you don't.
You don't really.
There are usually more than one factor, and you're not the factor. Yeah. Usually when it goes poorly, though, you probably are. So it's like sometimes you're just lucky. Yeah. And we take it as, well, the thing that I did created this. And I think, and maybe this was my dad, super great dad, really cool, was super involved, but like I had to be really safe if he was the umpire. Yeah. Like I'm talking 2 steps. So it was always more about like, what could you have done better? Yeah. What could you control? Yeah. And that kind of, so I think to me it is about like, you failed, what could you control next time? And owning that. Maybe it's just easier to say publicly, and when you're at a certain point in your career, or it's easier to sort of wrap your head around you've had enough failure.
Yeah,
like,
there's
60%
a pattern
of your
here.
thoughts, or 60,000 of your 80,000 thoughts were negative, so you're like, okay, this squares.
Yeah. In the world of snow science and avalanche forecasting, they talk a lot about false positives, where you go out and you ski a line or snowmobile a line that could have slid, but it didn't, and how dangerous that is. And I think that is often true of successes, where we're like, oh, well, that's definitely because of me. And then
Right.
something fails and you're like, well, that's got to be
Something
external.
else. Yeah. Yep.
What's a failure you've had at the business council that you've learned from?
Oh boy. I think there have been probably in general, it's those times when I sort of quote unquote don't know my place. Like I'll get into a situation and I'll get deep in a situation with the experts and I'll want to try to change it. So every one of the projects that come before us, there's a lot of work that gets done. There's an awful lot of work that gets done. And by people who really care about it and they dig into it and they're working with the community, they're working with businesses, they're working with all these people to try to understand it. And a lot of times I don't come in until the end.
Yeah.
And so when I'll come in at the end, I'll see some little things where I'm like, oh, well, we could make sure that this happens, or we could, we need to think about this. And early on at the business council, there were a few times when I would sort of try to rush around and like sand off those rough edges, or I would try to shape up the deal so that it would go through. And what I ended up doing usually was just causing confusion and making it so that the deal was like, not that it was different, but it seemed different. And so what I've worked to do, I still have that feeling. Whenever I hear a project, whenever it gets to me and to the, like right before it goes to our committee, like I'm thinking of all of the things that could go wrong. And I have this feeling like, okay, I'm going to call these 5 people. I'm going to go ahead and get this done and do all this. And then I have to actually stop and say, I'm not going to touch it.
Yeah.
And I'm going to let the process, which is really my job, is developing the process so that it works. I'm going to let it work. And we're going to trust that because otherwise we won't know if the process is good.
Right.
We won't know, it will likely be me that goofs it up, but we won't learn anything from it. And I'm sort of discounting all of the really good work for the people who have been in the process, who know it better than I do. And I don't think that's the way you want to do it. So I've actually done that in a couple projects, and I got really attached to them, and I thought that this was the way to go, and they turned out differently than I thought. And in the moment, I was upset. It's like, gosh, I could have fixed that, or the things that I did, made a difference, and then it turned out poorly because of it.
Yeah. One of the things I've heard around the business council sometimes is that you can't care more than a community does. What do you think about that?
I sort of disagree.
Let's go.
I disagree with that, and where I think that comes from is that if we were to do all of the work and we were to really push something onto a community and the community doesn't care, then you're in trouble. But I think maybe it's a give and take. Maybe it's not like, oh, we care 60% and the community needs to care 40%, but maybe it's like sometimes we do care 75% of the time to pull them along, and then sometimes they got to care 90% of the time to pull us along. And I think when you say, look, I'm willing to plug in and be part of it, that's caring. And I think a lot of times people think, well, we can't care more, so I'm just going to step away and let it happen. But I think there are some things that I know I need to improve on, and I hope people don't just step away and let me flounder. And I think the same thing for communities. There are things that they might need help with that we can help them in order to get them to the next place or to get this project going. I think the thing is when you push too hard for something that you want and you saddle a community with something that they maybe didn't want. And that, I think that's the balance you got to achieve. So I care a lot about Wyoming, and I know that community members care a lot about their communities. And so maybe it comes from this place where it's like, well, we're looking at the state, and I definitely care about that. But maybe I can't care about one community and the project that they're working on more than they do, because ultimately they're the ones that have to carry it forward. Ultimately, they're the ones that get to live with it. They're the ones that have to generate the money to get it going in the first place. And so if we're pushing it, it does make it harder. But I do think there are moments in there where we have to care a lot about it, because I think when you undertake a project, especially anytime you work with the government, things are slow. And anytime you work with the government, you have to do a lot of things that don't make sense on the outside, but make sense on the inside, or don't make sense from a certain perspective, but they make sense to, one group or another group. And so it seems like things are moving slow, but they're methodical and they're thoughtful, and they're also, things are happening that you'll never care about. And so there are times in every project where the initial enthusiasm starts to wane. It's just natural.
Yeah.
And so there's got to be somebody there to sort of like help that along and motivate things, because once you get through that little bit of a valley, that's where all the exciting stuff happens. And we have been in that situation a lot where we can maybe help people through that and say, look, this is natural. This is a natural part. We're going to care a lot right now. We're going to try to help you out, and we're going to show you how things work. And it's really more like support, not like we're going to do it, but it's more like support.
Yeah.
And I think there's just parts where in a long project you have to play that role.
Yeah. I think as a leader, it's always a delicate balance of caring a lot, being invested, and then somehow not being attached to the result, of like knowing that the result could go any way. But I think it's hard to get that equation right.
Yeah, and I probably never have.
Yeah.
Right. Like it's you kind of get it like, well, I got a B.
Yeah.
Right. I got a B on it, which
pretty
for
good.
my grades in college. That's
good job.
that's
We're
fantastic.
growing up with the GPA.
This is awesome. but you really don't, and I think that's the other part that that I'm learning in this role for sure, is that there are no like 100% victories.
Yeah.
There are no times where you knock it out of the park and you got 100%. Like you just don't do that. You know, like sometimes 75% is really good. Sometimes 60% is, you're like, we're winning. You know, and then on those times when it's 40, like, okay, well, what did we learn, and how could we take that 40 and add to it later? And I think that's one thing. Coming from a sales role, it's sort of like you hit your numbers, or you hit bonuses, you do those kinds of things, you hit profit. It's pretty simple. I mean, it's not easy, but it's simple.
Yeah.
And in this role, you're like, okay, well, we did this one good thing, but 3 other things popped up out of that.
Yeah.
And in aggregate, we kind of won, but it wasn't
we
this
have new
total
work.
victory. We have new work.
Yeah. And I think it's really neat how you kind of structured the business council to think about how do we remove or minimize constraints that other people have and maybe can't solve on their own. And scale will always, maybe not always, scale has always been a problem in Wyoming, that we're small. And I sometimes use the football metaphor that like there's no JV team here. So like just anybody who's playing is like on varsity. And sometimes you've got freshmen or sometimes you've got 8th graders out there playing and they don't totally know what they're doing, and you're trying to encourage them or keep them in the game and help give them those skills. And we talk about the flywheel a lot in the academy, and I think sometimes in Wyoming we get really good at doing the first lap of a flywheel and then we stop, or we get a whole new team and that inertia or momentum is lost. What kind of momentum do you feel like the business council is generating right now?
What I would say right now is, in terms of the flywheel, we're trying to get people to do cycles without money, because I think sometimes money sort of makes you feel like everything is going to work out, and you sort of forget, well, we have money, so we'll just do money on this project, and whether it actually makes a difference or not is sort of secondary. It's like the project is the end. And I think where we have momentum now is that we're working with people to understand that our role isn't just money. And so what we're getting is some momentum. We heard it today from one of our academy members. They were talking about assessment to action. You know, a program that we have where people learn to solve their problems at their local level, understand what the problems are, and then work to solve them, and realize that they're going to go through that cycle a few times. And money may never be the answer to their problem. And I think that's the momentum we're getting with a number. The academy is one of those opportunities. I think assessment to action is one. I think the building state capabilities, and then really the momentum around what problem are we solving and what problem do we have, rather than let's go out and try to fill the hole with money or cover it with things that make us feel good so that we don't have to think about it. Like, I think what we're doing is we're creating momentum, and this is a battle I actually have a lot, which is we talk a lot about the problems that we're trying to solve and what are the constraints to growth, and all that focus on what some people see as a negative. I don't. I see it as how could we grow faster if we didn't have this, right?
Yeah.
And so, but all of that talk around that, it can wear on folks. They can be like, well, when do we win? And we're like, we're winning right now because we're addressing the problem. And but it never feels like the Super Bowl. You know, it never feels like that moment maybe. And I think that's a balance that we're trying to achieve. Is we have a lot of challenges, And so how do you address those challenges and get people really into solving those problems and making the win solving those problems, not necessarily some victory or a trophy or anything like that. And I think that is exciting, but I think that's where we are. We're creating a place where people are comfortable to talk about those problems and maybe be willing to address them and realize that it may not be some big shiny thing. And that's actually you're actually developing the muscles you need to succeed in the long run.
Yeah. I think as people, we're not that wired for understanding big complex things, and we don't love uncertainty or ambiguity of we don't have all the information, and so maybe to that point of caring more than communities care, or having that whole picture, you kind of have to hold people to the problem a little bit to be there long enough to kind of understand it. Or I don't know, maybe like a ice bath, you get in and it's uncomfortable and you just get right out, versus if you get in it and you stay for a couple minutes, you kind of adjust and you're like, okay, I can't do this forever, but I could do this for a little while.
Right.
And I think a little bit that's kind of the work you're doing. It's if we want to solve these problems, it's going to get a little bit uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And we're going to have to be pretty honest about what's happening. And then this will bring healing. The ice bath is designed to create blood flow and restore your muscles and, send you back out. And so, yeah.
Yeah, the benefit of it is there. You have to be willing to sort of work through that initial shock. And the funny part is that a lot of times we find those people in communities who are willing to do it, and they're doing it.
Yeah.
They're way stronger than we are.
Yeah.
Right?
They did it on their own.
They're doing it on their own.
Yeah.
And one of the elements that we're trying to sort of understand and try to help with is this idea that they're doing that, but they need some help.
Yeah.
And they need a way to communicate it to others, and they need some support to say, hey, the state agrees with me. We're working on this problem, and the state sort of is coming in to show that it is a problem. It's going to take a long time to work through, but you got to do it. And that support for people who are doing it every day is really valuable. And we're trying to do that more and give people that kind of that common language because again, as humans, we want a simple answer. Yeah. We really seek a simple answer.
Yeah.
And we really seek, comfort and ease. That's our body's natural state is to do that. And so it's not good for it, but that's what it wants.
Yeah.
And so to overcome that, we kind of have to come in and maybe show that, that is a right approach. It's tough. What these folks have been working on and struggling with, that's reality. We're not going to swoop in and deliver some magical project that's going to save everybody's day.
Yeah.
We're going to come in and try to support them in their work and give them better tools, and then show that support to others to kind of build a team.
Yeah. And I mean, kind of in that same ice bath metaphor, when I was on a team, it was way easier to ice bath with a group of people than to do it on your own. And so you can sort of share in the suffering, but also share in the learning and the camaraderie and that feeling of satisfaction. Yeah.
And again, when you're in a team, there are times when one person's down and the other people are up and kind of bringing them along. And I think that's one of the things that a lot of times we think about leadership as this solo leader, and it just doesn't. I don't think it works. It doesn't work for me. It's not something that I could definitely do by myself, or one that just doesn't seem right. I definitely get a ton of energy from the people I'm around and the people that I get to work with, and they do all the cool stuff. I just get to be kind of nearby. Yeah. Right. It's a pretty cool feeling, really.
Yeah. Okay, let's say you have a magic wand, and overnight tonight you could wave the wand, and everyone in Wyoming would wake up tomorrow with a deeper understanding of X. What understanding or truth or thought process do you wish you could just bestow upon the citizens of Wyoming?
I think embracing complexity and uncertainty, like truly understanding that, especially when it comes to the economy, there aren't any simple answers. They've all been done, and they may not apply to us, right? Sometimes they've been applied somewhere else, and we're like, let's do that, and it's like, but we don't have that problem. We have a different one. So I think an understanding of complexity and an understanding that there is a lot of uncertainty, and you have to move forward in the face of that uncertainty, because otherwise it will always be uncertain. And I think that it's not like a $1 billion, and it's not a new industry, because those aren't going to save us, right? It's going to be this idea that in 50 years, there's going to be some new uncertainty out there. And our communities and our people need to sort of like embrace that complexity and the fact that they don't know and they won't know unless they work on it. That is a big one. And in that complexity, an understanding that yes, the things that we try today to solve that problem will create some more problems. And that is the nature of sort of humanity. Is like every problem that we solve, we create a few more, and we can't stop and try to make everything perfect or let one solution solve everything. It just doesn't. I think that mindset shift would be what I would bestow.
Yeah, that's cool. And one of the commencement talks I gave this year, I said, you know, you will either have the tools you need to do hard things, or you'll develop them in the process.
Right.
And I think that we know that maybe we don't know that intuitively, but it's a normal part of childhood and young adult years. And then there's some point as adults and leaders that either we get the luxury of sort of making the conditions around us easier, but we sort of think like, well, if I can't do it, or if I can't see a path through, then why bother? Or it's not worth it, or there's too much at stake. And I think those chapters of striving and growing and stretching and failing and trying again are often the good ones.
Yeah, I mean that is where growth happens, right? It really is the iterating around a problem is where you get better at it. And I think that we do forget, because I think too, as we get older, a lot of our needs are met, or we sort of adjust our needs to what we have, and so you get this. It's almost like it's a little bit of a cycle or a loop where you sort of say, yeah, but I can accept that, and I can accept that, and I can accept that, and you get to a spot where you become comfortable, right? And I think that there's a lot of to me, I fear the comfort, because I know there are challenges out there, and if you're not working to get better at solving them, then you're going to be ill prepared when they happen. And I think that comfort is something that I'm always a little skeptical of comfort.
Yeah. We were looking at an organization here in Lander that sort of had a hard time, and one of the thoughts of a leader there was that the board needed harder decisions more often during the good times, because they got to an actually really hard decision and they didn't necessarily have those lines of communication and that confidence or vision to really make those hard decisions. And I don't know, I think there's some comfort in that idea that when you're going through hard things, it will make the next hard thing easier, because you're developing the muscle and the connection to make it happen.
Yeah, well, and this is something that I've thought about in my career. I actually don't. There are a lot of folks who love sort of being at that spot where they're just things are smooth sailing.
Yeah.
They're cruising along. They're knocking down big profits, or their product is doing really, really well, and frankly, I'm actually not that person.
Yeah.
I don't really enjoy that part of it. I like the part where things don't look like they're going to work out.
Yeah.
I like the part where the stakes are maybe higher and the decisions have a lot more gravity.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean I make them. It means that I like to work with people to do it. But I sort of think to myself that, let's say in 10 years or 5 years or 2 years or whatever, everything was just peachy keen and everything got done in the next few years and the economy was cruising along really, really well. I don't think I would really enjoy that as much. I love that we would be in a spot like that. I mean, that's great. Yeah. But I don't think that I would want to be in the middle of sort of like reaping those benefits. Yeah. And that's just, I don't know.
Knowing yourself.
Kind of knowing who I am. It probably would be some other challenge out there.
Yeah. Well, maybe let's end here. This is our third academy. We'll have close to 100 graduates of the academy. What are you either sort of proud of looking back, or what do you hope that this sort of small army can accomplish in Wyoming?
Yeah. Well, I'm proud of a lot. I think if you take a look at what we did in the first academy, which was like four sessions, and then we cut it down to 3 sessions, and I think really packed it in. And at first, sometimes you can be a little concerned, like, okay, we're going to put a lot of pressure on folks in a short amount of time and expose them to a really big problem, and that it might be like too big to even wrap your head around, and a little scary. And at first, I was like, oh, that's a lot to put on folks, and will we be able to do that in a short amount of time? And what I'm proud of is how people respond to that. I think what I'm super encouraged every time we do an academy, or I get to to go into a community and meet with folks who are doing the work, like they're tough, they're smart, they're ready to go, they can handle it.
Yeah.
And so that's super exciting. I'm really proud of that. I'm kind of proud that we just did it at all.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of times, you come into a situation where it's like, these are the programs we use, these are the partners we use, let's do it. And I think in this case, we said we should do something different. And the problem is not being solved in the way we were doing it before. We should look at a new way of solving it. And I think so. I'm super, super proud of that, that people are willing to do that. And I think the second part of your question was?
What do you hope is true
hope.
in maybe 10 years or something from this crew?
Well, I think what we're trying to build is a team of thousands. What we're really trying to do is build the leadership from an economic lens perspective, where people can come in and say, hey, I don't know everything about this, but I can help out. Or I'm serving on a board for an economic development group in a community, and I understand these concepts enough where I can help out, and I can understand why they're making the decisions they're making, and I can be a little bit of an advocate for economic development and for making hard decisions in our economy. Because that's what we find, I think, a lot of times, is that people know what to do, but they're afraid to do it. And so if we could have a kind of this team of thousands out there thinking about the economy, thinking about how to do, make differences in our communities, then I think we will ultimately win. And so I think that's what really the Academy is intended to do, is not to help people in their day-to-day jobs, but it's in that extra that we need them to do, and to be supportive and really be just part of that, Team Wyoming, or team of thousands out there that are thinking about the next thing and the next generation.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks for talking about everything. It was fun chatting.
This is super fun. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for joining us. We'll be back soon. Recording?
All right.
Okay.
I feel super awkward though, right? Okay. I mean,
there will be an outtake.
More like regular awkward is what I normally am, but now. Okay,
and cue the outtakes.
The Leading Wyoming podcast is made possible thanks to the generous support of our all-in sponsors.